So I'm back in the military counter deception book. I love this book. It's awesome. 4.3, the incongruity rule and the analyst's advantage. Here's some little statements here. You cannot put the same shoe on every foot. Philebus Sirius, Maxim 596, which is actually about 42 BC. Sherlock Holmes is in The Hound of Baskervilles. The Hound of the Baskervilles, chapter 15, he says, the more ultra and grotesque an incident is, the more carefully it deserves to be examined, and the very point which appears to complicate a case is, when duly considered and scientifically handled, the one which is most likely to elucidate it. And Gordon Holmes, a pseudonym of Louis Tracy, a mysterious disappearance in 1905, writes, "We now have two tracks to follow. They are both hidden, it is true, but when we find one, it will probably intersect with the other." Now, incongruity and congruity rule is very simple. You have a mystery. Sometimes there's both an incongruity, or there's two types of incongruities when something is wrong. But when something's congruous, when something matches, there's only going to be one match. Let me go ahead and read this whole paragraph out. It explains it better than I would. Every real thing is always necessarily completely congruent with all its distinguishing characteristics. Conversely, every false thing will display at least two incongruities. Because every deception involves simultaneously showing at least one false thing and hiding a corresponding real thing. The congruity-incongruity rule tells us that the detective has two independent chances to detect any deception. And this is very important to realize, and with any kind of deceptive practice, going into a very dark world of people who murder others, they want to give a false illusion, a false alibi of where they were at a certain time. They give a false reality. And they also want to hide where they actually were by covering their tracks. So, if a detective looks at the murderer and finds out that the falsehood that they presented was false, then they can figure out and solve the crime. Or if they look at the truth of what it is that the murderer is saying and they find out that was also false, they have two paths to take. But if the murderer or supposed suspect of the murder tells the truth, then everything they say is going to be incongruous. That they didn't do the crime, that they didn't carry it out, and everything will make sense. They have a solid alibi. Thus, a deception will be confirmed if we detect either its simulated or its dissimulated half. Simulated means you show the false. You give a false reality to the detectives. Dissimulated means you hide the truth. You cover your tracks. You put gloves on your hands so you can hide your fingerprints. You clean up the murder scene with bleach, that kind of stuff. Moreover, even this half disclosure focuses the detective's guesses about what the remaining part could be, therefore greatly simplifying the effort to detect it as well. This one simple fact gives the detective a crucial advantage against every deceiver. And in my case, in theory development, one of the largest deceptions that I've stumbled upon is that the astronomers have been lying to us about the stars. They've been painting a false reality. They've been painting a simulated reality. They become black holes when they collapse upon themselves. That's the simulation. The dissimulation is hiding the truth. Now, Mother Nature has been very successful in hiding the truth because a lot of the exoplanets or the highly evolved stars that we look for in the night sky are very, very dim, and we can't see them at all because the light of their host just completely outshines them. But now we're finding these highly evolved stars, which are mislabeled still today as exoplanets via the transit method. We're finding out that the dissimulated information is picking up pace and it's being uncovered, as you will. So now we not only have the fact that we can point out the false that Mr. Stephen Crothers has done by showing that black holes are total nonsense. Stars don't collapse into black holes, they're nonsense. We can also get to the dissimulated information. We can find the truth because it's been hidden so well. We can make the information we have now congruous. And that being said, as it's becoming congruous, I wrote a paper here that I'll just review a few things here. Stellar mass black holes versus stellar metamorphosis. Now, with black holes, with that theory of black holes, the star collapses gravitationally and keeps its mass, keeps its energy, and becomes what the astrophysicists say is a singularity. But not a single singularity has ever been observed. They don't exist. They're making it all up. They're simulating a false reality, and they're teaching this false reality to astronomers even today. But as we'll see here, that's the simulation. That's the false reality that they're presenting. And with stellar mass black holes, if you can't form a small black hole, which then supposedly grows and grows and grows, becomes a supermassive black hole, then the very idea of a supermassive black hole can't exist. You have to have a sapling of a tree before you actually have the tree that's full grown, it's hundreds of years old, and it's the size of a building, you know. You have to start small and then work your way up if you're going to do anything black hole related. And this is why I'm attacking the stellar mass black holes, because stellar mass black holes can't form. Because the dissimulated reality, the reality that's been hidden all this time, while black hole theory has been pushed upon the public over many decades, is that stars, when they do gravitationally collapse, they become what we call planets. And that's why the planets are all different sizes, that's why they're all different masses, that's why it's essentially a fruit salad of objects out there. And they're all different masses, they're all different radiuses, they're all different chemical compositions. It's because they're all different stages of gravitationally collapsing into what we're more familiar with, the very Earth itself. And I've been getting views on this paper. This is why I wanted to read this one out to you guys. According to stellar mass black hole theory, a star keeps its mass and gravitationally collapses into a stellar mass black hole at the end of its life. A few inconsistencies and notes are provided below, rendering the stellar mass black hole a fictional and or unnecessary concept in light of the general theory. Number 1, stars do not keep their mass. When a star is radiating and losing its solar or its material via solar flares and solar wind, it's not going to keep its mass. Its mass is being lost. It's dissipating. That's what's happening when a star shines. It's dissipating its energy and its heat and its light away and its mass. They emit solar wind, solar radiation, have coronal mass ejections, and are also subject to mass loss to impacts and hotter hosts, photoevaporation effects. So another highly evolved star, if it gets too close to a much hotter one, it'll be ripped away. Like as if you take a marshmallow and you hold it over a campfire. A marshmallow is going to burn up, I guarantee it. The concept that a star keeps its mass as it evolves is as false as saying stars do not emit solar wind or shine. And that's a very big problem with the mathematicians. They model stars as being closed systems. There's no net transfer of mass with the environment. So the star doesn't lose mass and it doesn't gain mass. And they put the star into a box. So the math equations work out. They do what's called, they put the star in local thermodynamic equilibrium. And in order to put LTE on a star, they put it in a box so it only can shine. Like a closed system thermodynamically means you have light entering and exiting the star, but there's no mass transfer. There's no mass entering or exiting the star. But that's totally false because solar wind and flaring happens in stars. They're exchanging mass with their environment, so they're not closed systems. So any model that has the stars or young stars as objects in LTE is totally false, meaning the entire field of astrophysics is false because they model the sun as being in LTE when it's clearly totally bogus. Number 2, gravitational collapse occurs in stellar metamorphosis alongside energy loss and mass loss. Since stellar mass black hole theory requires gravitational collapse absent energy loss and mass loss, it does not accurately represent reality. Black holes don't represent reality whatsoever. It's when mathematicians they go off in the deep end. They've lost track of reality. And there's a statement that I remember hearing is that you can think deeply and clearly, but just because you think deeply doesn't mean you're thinking clearly. You can think very deeply and lose yourself in mathematical equations and just go off into fantasy land, but that's not thinking clearly. Thinking clearly can be thinking deeply and thinking on a shallow level, but thinking clearly is a completely different thing. Thinking deeply, you can go completely insane, like the black hole theorists have. But that doesn't mean that you're rational. It doesn't mean that your ideas are going to make any sense. Very excellent science fiction authors can think very deeply, but a lot of the ideas that they're talking about, they don't exist in reality. And that's the problem with mathematicians and astrophysicists. They paint these ideas in their head, the black hole stuff, and they make it real in their minds. And because they hold the high positions in universities, they can just tell people, this is the truth. Unfortunately, they hold the purse strings and they also hold the high chairs in lots of committees and research organizations. So if you challenge the black hole theory, you're also challenging them, and they don't like to be challenged. They like to be the ones in control of the organizations, and they like to have their little ego trips, if you will. Number 3, in stellar metamorphosis, a star can never become a singularity. It remains a three-dimensional structure throughout its evolution. This is easy. Length, width, and height. All physical things have length, width, and height. A singularity has none of that. 0 dimensions, meaning there's nothing there. They should have learned this in geometry class. Sure, you can think of a two-dimensional structure such as a triangle, but a triangle, that also doesn't exist in reality. There's no such thing as a two-dimensional structure. If you were to zoom in on the triangle on the piece of paper, you would see the graphite leaves a little mountain ridge on the graphite. And I mean, sure, it's microscopic, but still that triangle you drew is still a three-dimensional structure. But it's just so small that the idealization in its two-dimension is there. And then you have one dimension, like a line, I guess a line or a point. But those are conceptual things. A singularity goes even further off into fantasy land by saying there's no length, there's no width, there's no height. So what exactly are you describing here? And that's why the astrophysicists have lost their minds. They think that things that do not have length, width, or height exist in nature. Like, you're totally insane. Since the main energy source for a star as it dissipates is gravitational collapse and exothermic chemical reactions and not fusion reactions, I get a lot of shit for that. The lowest state of energy the material a star can reach is when the material reaches the Coulomb barrier, in which the electrostatic interaction prevents further collapse. All this means is when the star collapses gravitationally, it forms rocks and minerals. The stuff you can go to the beach and pick up in your hand, the beach sand, the silicon dioxide. It doesn't become some fictional science fiction entity called black hole. That's just total nonsense. 5, no black hole has ever been observed. In stellar metamorphosis, stars can be observed in all stages of evolution, and they all can fit on this graph. Notice that there's no black holes here. All this is the vacuum. This isn't black hole, this is just a vacuum. But stars, when they collapse, they become giant rocks, as we know, planets. 6, all stars have escape velocities in the general theory. The black hole's escape velocity is faster than light. Since nothing can travel faster than light, the black hole has no escape velocity. It's because black holes don't exist to begin with. Stephen Crothers has pointed this out. It's one of those plays on words where the black hole fails simple logic. If the black hole supposedly has an escape velocity faster than light, then nothing can be seen. So what exactly is anybody going to take a picture of? You see what I'm saying here? It's like, and then they force you to believe, oh, well, we took a picture of one. We could see a black hole with our telescopes. No, it's nonsense. That they've reached a point in those claims to where it's like, it's so ridiculous. It's so in your face ridiculous. And so many astronomers believe the idea, and nobody wants to be the one to say, hey, you guys, the emperor isn't wearing any clothes, because that's what it's become now. Not a single stellar mass black hole has been observed in any exoplanet system, and it's going to continue being like that because they don't exist. They've always been a fiction. Anyways, to tie that together with the congruity-incongruity rule, the simulation showing the false is astronomers showing what they think stars become, the black holes. It's totally false. And the dissimulation is the hiding of the real, the hiding of the truth. And we've basically just, our technology hasn't been as advanced as it could be, so we've had to discover the truth on our own. It wasn't that the astronomers were hiding it on purpose, as if they had malice in their hearts. So we're just going to make up all this crap and then we're going to force it upon people. No, they didn't have that type of mentality. It was more or less they took what they had at the time and they made the best of it. But now that we have better observations, it's time for us to look back at the past and say, well, those ideas were clearly false. We need to we need to fix the textbooks now. It's as simple as that. But things like that take a lot of time and a lot of money. All right, guys. I think I made this talk long enough. Take it easy.